half your gang. Is there a point to all these fancy clothes? With all these buckles from your head down to your toes? It's very simple, but I'm just another girl. It's not so easy, but I'm giving it a whirl. Is there something that you're trying to prove? With all the makeup and the way you move, are you looking for some sympathy? No, I'm trying to be the best girl I can be. It's very simple, but I'm just another girl. It's not so easy, but I'm giving it a whirl. Like my martini stride, cosmos I won't deny. Smoke those long cigarettes. Thank God I'm not dead yet. Done all these crazy things, short of a wedding ring. Just another girl.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Callista Solon, and you're watching nlcTrans. Tonight I'm here with my dear friend and co-host, as usual, Tara Alexander. I want to apologize. We've been off the air for a few weeks. That's actually my fault. I've been sick. Like so many out there, everybody's out there has got the flu. I think we decided I had the norovirus or something.
Yeah, I think you had the norovirus, not the flu, not influenza.
But it was awful. It knocked me out for, God, well, it's been 3 weeks now, and I've still got a little bit of the vertigo and stuff. It's just, I'm just getting over this. It's crazy. But there was a lot of bad stuff going around, and of course I got it. But
well, yeah, there is an influenza epidemic about.
Yeah, so it's not been much fun. So I haven't been, it's not like I was off sunning myself in the Caribbean or something. I was actually home sick.
Yeah.
For a very long time. But anyway, so sorry about that, and hopefully this won't happen again anytime soon. But anyway, so that's the reason that we've been off the air for a couple of weeks. So sorry about that. But anyway, we're back.
And they have studio upgrades coming up, which will take us off
yes,
for probably another week or two.
Yeah, we're not really 100% certain how that's going to go, but yeah, they're upgrading the equipment here, so there's a possibility. It won't be, that won't just be us. That will be
next week.
Next week, okay, yeah. So next week we won't be on, but nobody will be on. Nobody will be on. Yeah, thanks, Joe. But so yeah, that's going on. So, oh well, there's not too much we can do about that.
No. So you get a brief stint with us, and then.
But we'll be back after that. Sorry.
Back to arid landscapes.
Yeah. Anyway, it's cold out there. You have to forgive me for not wearing a dress tonight. It's so cold out there. God, I'm not used to this. We've had, the weather's been.
You're not wearing a dress, but your top has less on than your dresses do. Covers less than your
yes,
dresses do.
Yes, but. Yes, but I have a sweater which I left out there, and I have my Touch Me coat. My Touch Me coat my Touch Me coat is one that everybody always, I call it that because everybody always wants to touch it, because I have this full length suede coat which I like very much, but it's very warm. It's this big fur-lined suede coat that goes down to my feet, and it keeps me very warm. Sorry. Anyway, so yeah, I will be warm. It's actually warm in here, so I didn't wear the sweater. I'm talking too much. And Mike?
I'm sitting on.
You're sitting on your mic. Thanks, Joe. Anyway, yes, don't sit on the mic.
Boy, you can tell we've been away from this for a while.
I'm sorry. Okay.
We're all frazzled.
No, I'm going to get silly. Anyway, so we actually have some B-roll for you tonight. I think a little bit later we'll get to that. And I know you had some interesting news from the Pentagon. And I wanted to talk certainly a little bit about the inauguration. I actually I meant to watch the inauguration, and I forgot all about it. And Oh, I got busy doing stuff, and I
Yeah, but you
forgot.
can't miss it. Every freaking news channel is replaying their favorite snippets of it for like
Yeah.
6.5 lifetimes now.
Well, yeah, I know. But there's that was sort of interesting, and it's really kind of a wonderful thing, and it really is very cool. All the ceremony, the pomp and ceremony is very
The
neat.
first half African American reelected to presidency in our nation's history.
Yeah, it's very cool. But anyway, so the inauguration speech was apparently, I didn't get to listen to it, but I saw parts of it, later. And yes, the president was very inclusive in his speech, and actually called out some things like the Stonewall riots, which were very, very cool. For those of you that, well, everybody knows now that certainly that Stonewall was sort of the start of the gay rights movement. Back in '69, I believe it was.
From Seneca Falls to Selma to
Said,
Stonewall.
yeah, our journey is not complete until our gay brothers and sisters are treated like anyone else under the law. For if we are truly created equal, then surely the love we commit to one another must be equal as well, Obama said. He also invoked the Stonewall riots of 1969, which marked the beginning of the modern gay rights movement, as a milestone in civil rights history. We the people declare today that the most evident of truths, that all of us are created equal, is the star that guides us still, just as it guided our forebears through Seneca Falls and Selma and Stonewall, the president said. Very cool. So I was very happy about that. I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah.
And so it's been very inclusive, and apparently there was some more in the inaugural prayer today. Apparently was also by from what I understand. This was the Reverend, I believe, was also a member of the LGBT community. Very, very cool. I actually, I did. I don't know if we have time for this or not, but if not, I can get to this another time. I know we have stuff.
Go ahead.
But I saw this, and I haven't actually read this whole thing, but it looked very, very good, and I sort of wanted to share this with you. This was, I pulled this off The Advocate. This was an 11-year-old trans girl's response to Obama's inaugural speech. This was a trans girl, I believe, from Arizona, if I'm not mistaken, who wrote a little speech, and I'd love to read that to you if I can do it. Anyway, this was.
The less time you spend asking, the more time you have to read it.
All right. Well, I won't ask you that. I'm just going to do. Okay. This was in response to Obama's inaugural address, the first in the nation's history to expressly mention gay and lesbian Americans. An 11-year-old transgender girl in Arizona wondered why the president didn't also mention trans folk. Well, I think, in all fairness, we've made some major milestones here, and so I'm not going to criticize him too much for not going. Although, there were trans people at Stonewall.
There were. Stonewall was also the beginning of the broad LGBT rights movement. When people say the gay rights movement, they're talking about the rainbow, the gender and sexual minority movement.
And there were transgender people at that riot that were instrumental in that riot, and so it was.
And you could arguably say that when people talk about the gay rights movement, they're talking both about the gay and lesbian rights,
right?
Gay, lesbian, bisexual rights movement in specific, but the gender and sexual minority movement in general.
Right.
So mentioning Stonewall is mentioning.
Yeah. But anyway, this
the
is
beginning of trans right movement.
This is a cute 11-year-old from.
Plus, it'd be a 6.5-hour speech if you mentioned every minority group.
I know.
But struggling.
Let's see. The 5th grader named Sadie was inspired to write her own address after she heard the president's speech and felt the transgender community wasn't included. Which she obviously it was included, but anyway. Sadie's mother, Sage Croft, told the Huffington Post. Croft also told the Huffington Post that Sadie began her transition from male to female in kindergarten and was homeschooled until this year. Anyway, so she wrote. It has this little wonderful handwritten speech, but
Typed it up so it's easy to read.
Typed it up for people like me that are going to have trouble reading this. But I'm going to read the speech to you just because it's not very long, and I thought that was kind of cool. This is the letter titled Sadie's Dream for the World, reads as follows. The world would be a better place if everyone had the right to be themselves, including people who have a creative gender identity and expression. Transgender people are not allowed the freedom to do things everyone else does, like go to the doctor, go to school, get a job, and even make friends. Transgender kids like me are not allowed to go to most schools because the teachers think we are different from everyone else. The schools get afraid of how they will talk with the other kids' parents, and transgender kids are kept secret or told not to come there anymore. Kids are told not to be friends with transgender kids, which makes us very lonely and sad. When they grow up, transgender adults have a hard time getting a job because the boss thinks the customers will be scared away. Doctors are afraid of treating transgender patients because they don't know how to take care of them, and some doctors don't really want to help them. Transgender patients like me travel to other states to see a good doctor. It would be a better world if everyone knew that transgender people have the same hopes and dreams as everyone else. We like to make friends and want to go to school. Transgender people want to get good jobs and go to doctors like they are exactly the same. It really isn't hard to like transgender people because we are like everyone else. That was Sadie's dream for the world from an 11-year-old from Arizona. It's interesting that she's going to another state to go to a doctor.
That is the inference, isn't it?
Yeah, and certainly, and she was homeschooled because obviously the school system didn't want to deal with her. I'm assuming that. But this is in Arizona, and it sort of speaks to maybe the way things are.
Well, and even here at home, we know that if you're someone Sadie's age, you're probably working with a specialist out of Boston.
Yeah.
Who specializes in transgender children. So yeah, you may have regular doctors here in the state, but every once in a while you're traveling up to Boston.
Well, yeah.
So it's not that far-fetched that it would be normally happening, at least on the East Coast where the states are smaller. But yeah, someplace like, you said Arizona?
She's in Arizona, yeah. Which I think is typically, I'm not 100% on this, but I think Arizona is one of the less friendly places to members of our community. But anyway, so that was from an 11-year-old. I thought that was kind of nice. That was her hope for the world. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So, but it's a good thing, and I think this has been it's been very progressive and nice, and I'm really happy about the president mentioning the community, and certainly he's gotten some criticism for that, but I don't care.
Well, and one of the interesting criticisms from someone in his own party was that less than 9 months ago, he was evolving on the issue of same-sex marriage. Now, obviously, this is a political statement, but
sure.
He was evolving on the issue of same-sex marriage. And less than 9 months later, it's so important to him as a political platform initiative that he mentions it in his inaugural address, not just in passing, but in stark contrast to his last inaugural address.
Yeah.
In quite explicit terms that this is wrong and should be addressed. In less than 9 months, you go from, I don't know, I'm still thinking about it, to, it's faster than most people would make it, which is why the criticism, I think, from the right, a lot of the criticism from the right that I've seen that, see, he's been like this all along, he just didn't say anything for political reasons. And it's like, wow, you're just figuring that out now. Yes. Everyone on the left knew that 4 years ago.
Right. Oh, yeah. Welcome to politics. But,
welcome to 2013.
But you know what?
Where the vast majority of people in the country don't really care if 2 guys or 2 women are allowed to marry.
You know what? Evolution is a good thing.
Well,
so there. But anyway, so it's all good. So Anyway, what else is going on?
And what else is going on? Well, I have a couple of things that are older, since we weren't here for the last couple of weeks. These date back to the turn of the year. This was an interesting one because of the debate that's gone on here in the country. This was from December 28th of last year. A little noticed procedural change has removed Mexico's ban on blood donations from gay and bisexual men.
Right.
Went into effect on Christmas Day. The new health norm was approved in August, published in the nation's regulatory diary in October, and went into effect December 25th, doing away with the 2-decade-old ban. The old policy explicitly banned gay and bisexual men from donating blood due to their increased probability of acquiring HIV or hepatitis infection through their practices. Mm-hmm. In the U.S., it's called MSM, men who have sex with men, and our blood supply is still prohibited. If you've had sex with a man, I think in the last, is it 10 years or?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's 10 years. If you've had sex with a man and you're a man, in the last 10 years, you're prohibited from. It might be longer. It might be ever. I don't remember the specific. We had looked it up, but I forgot.
Yeah, right.
They defined them as risky sexual practices, which is kind of amazing because men who have sex with men don't really engage in any practices that men who have sex with women don't engage in.
Yeah. I know, it's funny, isn't it?
But anyway, regardless, so in this aspect, at least, some people would consider Mexico to be ahead of the U.S. in having done away with the ban on people, and instead actually relying on, well, when the blood's donated, you test the blood, and if the blood's not useful because there's stuff in it, you don't use the blood. As opposed to, we're not even going to take the time to draw your blood and see.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, and certainly I think that that speaks to the probably incorrect notion that that gay men are the most likely to have HIV or AIDS. I think that some of the demographics as far as where that virus is,
and it certainly it certainly is. Present in gay male populations here in the United States. But I think the last time we heard that the fastest growing population with an HIV/AIDS problem was among 50-plus people.
Yeah.
Basically, older Americans that basically figured, I'm far enough along. If I haven't gotten it now, I'm not going to get it. Even if I get it, by the time it starts affecting me, I'll be gone, and that's just not the case.
Yeah.
That, and I think there's more and more acceptance of 50-plus adults being, remaining sexually active and being, in viable relationships and on into their much later years.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
I know we've certainly talked about some of the problem with the HIV is that it seems to have to some degree been forgotten.
Yeah,
it's like, oh yeah, what was that? That's been taken care of. It's like, no, it hasn't.
It's nice to see some PSAs on TV, and even though it's commercialized, it's nice to see the ads for the home HIV tests.
Yeah,
because it does put that thought back in people's heads that. Although what we really do need to do is have HIV testing be added to your basic blood panel, and stop stigmatizing HIV like it's anything different. If we stop stigmatizing homosexual activity and we stop stigmatizing HIV, then a lot of the rest of this stuff works itself out. I think there's still a lot of ingrained homophobia in our lawmakers.
Yeah. Anyway,
in our laws.
Mexico.
To that end, we talked about this last year, but it looks like Rhode Island. This was as of January 1st. Rhode Island was to introduce a marriage equality bill. I know that they were looking to have some electoral changes before they could push it. I don't think that. So now State Representative Arthur Handy, who is a bill sponsor, said that they need to recruit some more sponsors, which may have happened by now. I should have followed up on this. That the bill will address religious groups' concerns, making clear that no church will have to perform a marriage that goes against its beliefs. And here again, we run into the unfortunate homonym that marriage as a civil institution, as a civil contract engaged into by two consenting adults, is not the same thing as the sacrament of marriage that religions practice differently.
Right.
But that the 2012 election results increased the number of marriage equality supporters in the legislature, helping the bill's chances of passage, and Governor Lincoln Chafee is a supporter. So there's a good possibility that
that's very cool.
We'll turn more colors in New England.
Yeah. Well,
so
that's good.
We'll move on to if you want, the interesting news of the day, and then our B-rolls.
Yeah.
Because something we haven't talked about for a while is actually women's rights.
Yes, this was interesting.
This goes back to one of those older civil rights movements. Today, this afternoon, Defense Secretary Leon Panetta lifted the military's ban on women in combat, which will open up hundreds of thousands of additional frontline jobs. It overturns a 1994 Pentagon rule that restricts women from artillery, armor, infantry, and other such combat roles. This primarily affects the Army. Excuse me. Even though, in reality, women have found themselves in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. As of last year, more than 800 women had been wounded in the two wars, and more than 130 had died. So the interesting thing here, we've not necessarily you and I on this show, but as a society, pretty much everybody's heard stories of women serving in Iraq or Afghanistan, and the problem is, without trenches, without trench warfare,
where's the front line?
Where's the front line?
Yeah.
When you have insurgent campaigns and you have rockets and mortars and buried bombs in the road, where's the front line?
Right, yeah.
So you have women serving in non-combat roles in combat situations. But there are specific positions in the military that are clearly ground combat, such as artillery and infantry, that women have not been able to take those positions. So they may have been serving in a policing role or an escort role where they're sitting in the turret on the Humvee with a .50 caliber machine gun or something, and firing back at the dirt over there because they're being fired upon. But that's not a combat role.
Right, right.
So because of that, what had happened is, recently as 2 months ago, 4 servicewomen filed a federal lawsuit against the Pentagon challenging its combat restrictions, saying that they had served in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan but had not been recognized for it. One woman, Major Mary Jennings Heger, an Air National Guard helicopter pilot, was shot down, returned fire, and was wounded while on the ground. She said she could not seek combat leadership positions because the Defense Department did not officially acknowledge her as having combat experience. In the military, serving in combat positions like the infantry remains crucial to career advancement. Women have long said that by not giving them their real service, the military has unfairly held their advancement back. So they sued, and as of January 9th, a letter from General Martin E. Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, stated in strong terms that the armed service chiefs all agreed, quote, that the time has come to rescind the direct combat exclusion rule for women and to eliminate all unnecessary gender-based barriers to service. There were 2 notes of caution. To implement these initiatives successfully and without sacrificing our or the trust of the American people, we will need time to get it right. Yeah, that sentence got lost. But so Mr. Panetta, now that, just before he steps down from his job as Defense Secretary, has rescinded this ban. And actually, while this article doesn't go into it, one of the other ones did. That there's something like a 3-year phase-in period. So this is where we're going to give it plenty of time.
Right.
By issuing this this directive, Defense Secretary Panetta has instructed the branches to come up with the process that women can apply for these combat roles, figure out what criteria need to be met for women to be accepted into these combat positions, and figure out what positions, if any, there are that would need special consideration and would therefore still be restricted from women. They were talking about, potentially Green Beret positions. A member of the Green Berets might still be restricted to men only. Or if there's a particular role in loading a howitzer where you need to be able to lift an 80-pound shell and carry it and put it in a cradle, well, then obviously a man or a woman applying for that position would need to be able to demonstrate the capability. In the infantry, if you need to be able to carry a certain amount of weight over a certain distance in a certain amount of time, those kinds of things need to be determined. But to set up those rules, to take the next couple years to set up what those rules are, so that women that meet the criteria will be able to serve in those positions. Because for a long time, we haven't seen a lot of women in high positions in the Army, and it's in large part been because combat experience is highly valued, and even if they have it, they can't officially have it.
Which is not fair.
Which is not fair, and which is what they sued for, and what they won. So, well, whether they won or not, they're reacting. So
that's a good thing.
Defense Secretary Panetta has actually been getting a lot of interesting comments, I guess is what I'll say, because he's only had the job for 18 months. But in those 18 months, he's had a number of dramatic effects on modernizing our Army from the social standpoint, in removing barriers to service, removing restrictions to service, and in not turning away well-qualified individuals because of something that the military doesn't even care about.
Right.
But
very cool.
And reading some of the comments on it, there are still a bunch of people out there that don't think women have it in them for combat roles. And you know what? It may be true that the vast majority of enlisted women would not be right for that. But if you find 12 or 15 women who are and who want to be, this removes the barrier to them getting there.
Yes.
And so that's a good thing. So our TED Talks tonight are actually on gender stereotypes and how we learn our gender stereotypes and maybe where we ought to be going.
Sure. Very cool.
So with that, we have about 21 minutes of TED Talks, and then we'll come back and close up.
I'm going to make an argument today that may seem a little bit crazy. Social media and the end of gender. Let me connect the dots. I'm going to argue today that the social media applications that we all know and love, or love to hate, are actually going to help free us from some of the absurd assumptions that we have as a society about gender. I think that social media is actually going to help us dismantle some of the silly and demeaning stereotypes that we see in media and advertising about gender. If you hadn't noticed, our media climate generally provides a very distorted mirror of our lives and of our gender, and I think that's going to change. Now, most media companies, television, radio, publishing, games, you name it, they use very rigid segmentation methods in order to understand their audiences. It's old school demographics. They come up with these very restrictive labels to define us. Now, the crazy thing is that media companies believe that if you fall within a certain demographic category, then you are predictable in certain ways, that you have certain taste, that you like certain things. And so the bizarre result of this is that most of our popular culture is actually based on these presumptions about our demographics. Age demographics, the 18 to 49 demo, has had a huge impact on all mass media programming in this country since the 1960s, when the baby boomers were still young. Now they've aged out of that demographic, but it's still the case that powerful ratings companies like Nielsen don't even take into account viewers of television shows over age 54. In our media environment, it's as if they don't even exist. Now, if you watch Mad Men like I do, it's a popular TV show in the States, Dr. Faye Miller does something called psychographics, which first came about in the 1960s, where you create these complex psychological profiles of consumers. But psychographics really haven't had a huge impact on the media business. It's really just been basic demographics. So I'm at the Norman Lear Center at USC, and we've done a lot of research over the last 7-8 years on demographics and how they affect media and entertainment in this country and abroad. And in the last 3 years, we've been looking specifically at social media to see what has changed. And we've discovered some very interesting things. All the people who participate in social media networks belong to the same old demographic categories that media companies and advertisers have used in order to understand them. But those categories mean even less now than they did before. Because with online networking tools, it's much easier for us to sort of escape some of our demographic boxes. We're able to connect with people quite freely and to sort of redefine ourselves online. And we can lie about our age online, too, pretty easily. We can also connect with people based on our very specific interests, right? We don't need a media company to help do this for us. So the traditional media companies, of course, are paying very close attention to these online communities. They know this is the mass audience of the future. They need to figure it out. But they're having a hard time doing it because they're still trying to use demographics in order to understand them, because that's how ad rates are still determined. When they're monitoring your click stream, and you know they are, they have a really hard time figuring out your age and your gender and your income. They can make some educated guesses. But they get a lot more information about what you do online, what you like, what interests you. That's easier for them to find out than who you are. And even though that's still sort of creepy, there is an upside to having your taste monitored. Suddenly, our taste is being respected in a way that it hasn't been before. It had been presumed before. So when you look online at the way people aggregate, they don't aggregate around age, gender, and income. They aggregate around the things they love, the things that they like. And if you think about it, shared interests and values are a far more powerful aggregator of human beings than demographic categories. I'd much rather know whether you like Buffy the Vampire Slayer rather than how old you are. That would tell me something more substantial about you. Now, there's something else that we've discovered about social media that's actually quite surprising. It turns out that women are really driving the social media revolution. If you look at the statistics, these are worldwide statistics. In every single age category, women actually outnumber men in their use of social networking technologies. And then if you look at the amount of time that they spend on these sites, they truly dominate the social media space, which is a space that's having a huge impact, right, on old media. The question is, what sort of impact is this going to have on our culture? And what's it going to mean for women? If the case is that social media is dominating old media and women are dominating social media, then does that mean that women are going to take over global media? Are we suddenly going to see a lot more female characters in cartoons and in games and on TV shows? Will the next big budget blockbuster movies actually be chick flicks? Could this be possible, that suddenly our media landscape will become a feminist landscape? Well, I actually don't think that's going to be the case. I think that media companies are going to hire a lot more women because they realize this is important for their business. And I think that women are also going to continue to dominate the social media sphere. But I think women are actually going to be, ironically enough, responsible for driving a stake through the heart of cheesy sort of genre categories like the chick flick and all these other genre categories that presume that certain demographic groups like certain things, that Hispanics like certain things, that young people like certain things. This is far too simplistic. The future entertainment media that we're going to see is going to be very data-driven, and it's going to be based on the information that we ascertain from taste communities online, where women are really driving the action. So you may be asking, well, why is it important that I know what entertains people? Why should I know this? Of course, old media companies and advertisers need to know this. But my argument is that if you want to understand the global village, it's probably a good idea that you figure out what they're passionate about, what amuses them, what they choose to do in their free time. This is a very important thing to know about people. I've spent most of my professional life researching media and entertainment and its impact on people's lives. And I do it not just because it's fun. Actually, it is really fun. But also because our research has shown over and over again that entertainment and play have a huge impact on people's lives. For instance, on their political beliefs and on their health. And so if you have any interest in understanding the world, looking at how people amuse themselves is a really good way to start. So imagine a media atmosphere that isn't dominated by lame stereotypes about gender and other demographic characteristics. Can you even imagine what that looks like? I can't wait to find out what it looks like. Thank you so much.
You know, my favorite part of being a dad is the movies I get to watch. I love sharing my favorite movies with my kids, and when my daughter was 4, we got to watch The Wizard of Oz together. Totally dominated her imagination for months. Her favorite character was Glinda, of course. Gave her a great excuse to wear a sparkly dress and carry a wand. But you know, you watch a movie enough times, and you start to realize how unusual it is. Now, we live today and are raising our children in a kind of children's fantasy, spectacular industrial complex. But The Wizard of Oz stood alone. It did not start that trend. 40 years later was when the trend really caught on, with, interestingly, another movie that featured a metal guy and a furry guy rescuing a girl by dressing up as the enemy's guards. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Now, there's a big difference between these two movies, a couple of really big differences between The Wizard of Oz and all the movies we watch today. One is there's very little violence in The Wizard of Oz. The monkeys are rather aggressive, as are the apple trees. But I think if The Wizard of Oz were made today, the wizard would say, Dorothy, you are the savior of Oz that the prophecy foretold. Use your magic slippers to defeat the computer-generated armies of the Wicked Witch. But that's not how it happens. Another thing that's really unique about The Wizard of Oz, to me, is that all of the most heroic and wise and even villainous characters are female. Now, I started to notice this when I actually showed Star Wars to my daughter, which was years later, and the situation was different. At that point, I also had a son. He was only 3 at the time. He was not invited to the screening. He is too young for that. But he was the second child, and the level of supervision had plummeted. So he wandered in, and it imprinted on him like mommy duck does to its duckling. And I don't think he understands what's going on, but he is sure soaking in it. And I wonder what he's soaking in. Is he picking up on the themes of courage and perseverance and loyalty? Is he picking up on the fact that Luke joins an army to overthrow the government? Is he picking up on the fact that there are only boys in the universe except for Aunt Beru? And of course, this princess who's really cool, but who kind of waits around through most of the movie so that she can award the hero with a medal and a wink. to thank him for saving the universe, which he does by the magic that he was born with. Compare this to 1939 with The Wizard of Oz. How does Dorothy win her movie? By making friends with everybody and being a leader. Like, that's kind of the world I'd rather raise my kids in. Oz, right? And not the world of dudes fighting, which is where we kind of have to be. Why is there so much force, capital F force, in the movies we have for our kids and so little Yellow Brick Road? I mean, there is a lot of great writing about the impact that the boy violent movie has on girls, and you should do that reading. It's very good. I haven't read as much on how boys are picking up on this vibe. I know from my own experience that Princess Leia did not provide the adequate context that I could have used in navigating the adult world that is co-ed. I think, there was a kind of first kiss moment when I really expected the credits to start rolling, because that's the end of the movie, right? I finished my quest, I got the girl, why are you still standing there? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. The movies are very, very focused on defeating the villain and getting your reward, and there's not a lot of room for other relationships and other journeys. It's almost as though if you're a boy, you are a dopey animal, and if you were a girl, you should bring your warrior costume. I mean, there are plenty of exceptions, and I will defend the Disney princesses in front of any of you. But they do send a message to boys that the boys are not really the target audience. I mean, they are doing a phenomenal job of teaching girls how to defend against the patriarchy, but they are not necessarily showing boys how they're supposed to defend against the patriarchy. There's no models for them. And we also have some terrific women who are writing new stories for our kids. And as three-dimensional and delightful as Hermione and Katniss are, these are still war movies. And, of course, the most successful studio of all time continues to crank out classic after classic, every single one of them about the journey of a boy or a man or two men who are friends, or a man and his son, or two men who are raising a little girl. Until, as many of you are thinking, this year, when they finally came out with Brave. I recommend it to all of you. It's on demand now. Do you remember what the critics said when Brave came out? Oh, I can't believe Pixar made a princess movie. It's very good. Don't let that stop you. Now, almost none of these movies pass the Bechdel test. I don't know if you've heard of this. It has not yet caught on and caught fire, but maybe today we will start a movement. Alison Bechdel is a comic book artist, and back in the mid-'80s, she recorded this conversation she'd had with a friend about assessing the movies that they saw. And it's very simple. There's just 3 questions you should ask. Is there more than one character in the movie that is female who has lines? So try to meet that bar. And do these women talk to each other at any point in the movie? And is their conversation about something other than the guy that they both like? Right? Thank you. Thank you very much. 2 women who exist and talk to each other about stuff. It does happen. I've seen it, and yet I very rarely see it in the movies that we know and love. In fact, this week I went to see a very high-quality movie, Argo, right? Oscar buzz, doing great at the box office, a consensus idea of what a quality Hollywood film is. Pretty much flunks the Bechdel test. And I don't think it should, because a lot of the movie, I don't know if you've seen it, but a lot of the movie takes place in this embassy where men and women are hiding out during the hostage crisis. We got quite a few scenes of the men having deep, angst-ridden conversations in this hideout. And the great moment for one of the actresses is to peek through the door and say, "Are you coming to bed, honey?" Like, that's Hollywood for you. So let's look at the numbers. 2011, the 100 most popular movies, how many of them do you think actually have female protagonists. 11. It's not bad. It's not as many percent as the number of women we've just elected to Congress, so that's good. But there is a number that is greater than this that's going to bring this room down. Last year, the New York Times published a study that the government had done. Here's what it said. 1 out of 5 women in America say that they have been sexually assaulted sometime in their life. Now, I don't think that's the fault of popular entertainment. I don't think kids' movies have anything to do with that. I don't even think that, music videos or pornography are really directly related to that. But something is going wrong. And when I hear that statistic, one of the things I think of is that's a lot of sexual assailants. Who are these guys? What are they learning? What are they failing to learn? Are they absorbing the story that a male hero's job is to defeat the villain with violence and then collect the reward, which is a woman who has no friends and doesn't speak? Are we soaking up that story? As a parent with the privilege of raising a daughter, like all of you who are doing the same thing, we find this world and this statistic very alarming, and we want to prepare them. We have tools at our disposal like girl power, and we hope that that will help. But I gotta wonder, is girl power going to protect them if at the same time, actively or passively, we are training our sons to maintain their boy power? I think the Netflix queue is one way that we can do something very important. And I'm talking mainly to the dads here. I think we have got to show our sons a new definition of manhood. Now, the definition of manhood is already turning upside down. You've read about how the new economy is changing the roles of caregiver and wage earner. They're throwing it up in the air. So our sons are going to have to find some way of adapting to this, some new relationship with each other. And I think we really have to show them and model for them how a real man is someone who trusts his sisters and respects them and wants to be on their team and stands up against the real bad guys, who are the men who want to abuse the women. And I think our job in the Netflix queue is to look out for those movies that pass the Bechdel test, if we can find them, and to seek out the heroines who are there, who show real courage, who bring people together, and to nudge our sons to identify with those heroines and to say, I want to be on their team, because they're going to be on their team. When I asked my daughter who her favorite character was in Star Wars, do you know what she said? Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Glinda. Now, what do these two have in common? Maybe it's not just the sparkly dress. I think these people are experts. I think these are the two people in the movie who know more than anybody else, and they love sharing their knowledge with other people to help them reach their potential. Now, they're leaders. I like that kind of quest for my daughter, and I like that kind of quest for my son. I want more quests like that. I want fewer quests where my son is told, go out and fight it alone, and more quests where he sees that it's his job to join a team. Maybe a team led by women, to help other people become better and be better people, like the Wizard of Oz. Thank you. Well, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that. I think that was really very nice.
I want to say, and this is something we probably should talk about at some point in the future, and we've talked about it before, but just to point out that it isn't just women that get abused.
No.
And I don't think he was trying to say that, but that was very nice. I really liked that,
Well, and to even strike closer to home, according to the numbers we got from Connecticut Sexual Assault Crisis Services,
scary numbers.
If the adults are reporting 1 in 5 women have been sexually assaulted, Connecticut Sexual Assault Crisis Services has been reporting that 1 in 2 girls under the age of 18 have been sexually assaulted, and 95 to 99% of them by someone they consider friend or family.
Yeah, it's very scary.
So that's a lot of not respecting women going on.
Yes, yeah. It's really, the statistics are very, very scary on that. And certainly at some point in the future we should probably talk about that. Obviously we don't have a lot of time tonight. But that was really nice. I liked that. And yeah, for myself, I hadn't really thought too much about that, but wow.
About which part?
About what's going on in the movies and the characters.
Well,
and
wow. He didn't call it out, and maybe there's good reason for it, but I would also throw in there The Incredibles. Because there is an actual relationship. I mean, it does center around the father and his quest, but it also there's also the secondary story of the wife and the kids who tag along, and mother and daughter have conversations. And maybe that's familial and doesn't count on that particular scale. And that is about the only female interaction, short of fighting over a man.
Right.
But
not that there's anything wrong with fighting over a man.
But it's funny when you look at that scale, and I've seen that scale before. You ask those 3 questions, and when you see the questions, you laugh because it's like, well, come on, that's just like a simple thing, and then you start to realize movie after movie after movie after movie.
Yeah.
They don't. There might be more than one woman in it, but they don't talk to each other directly about anything other than a guy.
Yeah.
That stands between them.
Yeah. Kind of amazing, but anyway, so yeah, we are like about out of time.
Yeah.
But apparently we are not going to be on next week because of the revamping of the equipment in the studio.
So we'll be rerunning this show.
So you'll probably see this one again, yeah. So don't be surprised. But the second time you see it, these comments won't count. The second time you see this next week, we will be on, I think.
Yeah, if it's the 30th and not the 23rd, we're recorded.
Right. So anyway, but so
is it live or is it Memorex?
Right. Anyway, but we got to go.
Okay.
So anyway, thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we won't be sick anymore, and we'll be on every week. But thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you again in 2 weeks. Bye bye.